Now, it is time to introduce someone that most of you already know. Dr. Reid became the superintendent when I was in 6th grade after serving in the South Kitsap and Port Angeles School District. In 2021, she received the esteemed accommodation of being Superintendent of the Year. She is known regionally and nationally for instructional leadership and crafting sustainable systems for district support of the instructional core. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Michelle Reid.
Thank you, Ariana and team. Appreciate that. And I really think we ought to give another hand to Nora. That was really powerful. Also want to remind Jake that his wooden Wildcats are doing very well on the prowl. So we appreciate having those 2 Wildcats. So thank you, Jake. So it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon and really be thoughtful about our work and most importantly about our community. I think it's important to remember that learning happens best in community, and this is an amazing community. Our schools are a reflection of our community, and the fact that the Education Foundation is such a supportive member of our community, we would not be the district we are today without the support of our North Shore Schools Foundation. So I'd like to give it up for Carmen and the North Shore Schools Foundation Board. Speaking of board support, our district, I also know we have a number of our school board members here. If you wouldn't mind standing, we'd give you a hand, our North Shore School District board members. I will just say that it has been a really, I don't know if unprecedented is the right word, Jake, but it has been several years of opportunity for our board and our senior leadership in the district, and we are a better district for those opportunities. In many places, communities were blown apart and divisions that were deep became deeper. And in our community, we did not. In fact, we came together, which was different than what a lot of communities did, and that's evidenced even by the fact you're here. And that's what winning communities and winning schools have in common. In a crisis, they don't blow apart and run from one another. They come together and work with one another. And that's what makes our community and our district special. I also want to recognize our senior leadership in the district, many of whom are here, and I thank you. It's been a long day and a long week. In the 5th week between midwinter break and spring break, and yes, we're counting them because we have 6-week chunks. And we recognize that if we could plan 6 weeks at a time, we could get through anything. Omicron, and now the new variant. Our numbers are ticking up a little, as you might know if you're looking at our dashboard. But we can take it 6 weeks at a time and do amazing things 6 weeks at a time without thinking about years ahead. And Jake, I hope you weren't a harbinger of, you said there were more things to come. If there's something you know that's post-pandemic, please give me a heads up. It'd be really helpful to know that. So I want to follow Nora's comments. Carmen and I had a chance to review Nora's comments earlier in the week, and I was very moved by them. As the person responsible for, in really large part, the education Nora is receiving, and all of our students are receiving, it's important to hear feedback that we need to hear and not just the feedback we want to hear. And so that ability to be honest and thoughtful is really important. So thank you. I think it also convicted me personally and convicted our district about the need to open the schools of the future and not reopen the schools of the past. Our schools of the past did not work for every student. There were historic inequities, and we are working on making sure that those stay historical and not current. As we think about our secondary education in particular, the Committee of 10 130 years ago designed what we do in secondary education. And quite honestly, if they were still alive today, they would recognize it because it doesn't look very different than it did 130 years ago. And the data point I want you to walk away with today, if you remember very little else, is that 65% of the children in our school district right now, which is about 6 out of every 10, right? 65% of the children in our school district now are preparing for careers that do not exist today. That is the current research out there. 65% of our young people are preparing for careers that do not yet exist. And that is a challenge to each of you in this room, because we have to think about what do our students need to be successful in that world yet to be imagined. And we're so grateful to have partners that are able to fund innovative ideas, nimble ideas that can happen very quickly, because that's what happens out in the real world. I know we have many business folks in the room. You could not possibly process your ideas as long as some of us take to process ideas. I cannot imagine a business that's sitting here that's doing work the way they did it 130 years ago and is still viable. It's not reality. So the work we're doing, I think, is so important and so predicated on our support from our founding or our funding partners. I also want to touch on something Nora said about, and also our other speakers, about the importance of having a just school system. And we often talk about equity as truth in action. And we had last Friday, our Student Justice Collective designed a Student Justice Conference, which we held at Cascadia. It was a really powerful experience for over 200 of our high school students. They had an opportunity to hear a keynote from Dr. Chris Emden, and then were asked about kind of what the deep meaning they found in that morning. And he talked about how important it was for each and every student to be able to show up in learning spaces as their authentic selves. And he talked about how hard it was and how exhausting it was, and we heard that a little from Nora, to be in a learning space and have to pretend you're something else, or try to match somebody else's vision of who you are. That takes a lot of energy if you feel you need to do that, and that energy could be spent on learning, right, and deepening your own understanding. So that was the premise of many other topics that we talked about last Friday. One of the students left a note that said, "My favorite part about today was feeling heard," about using their voice. Another student shared how to use my inspiration to turn it into action. And another said, "We must not be bystanders to oppression and injustice." And the more I thought about what I heard there, what I hear from my student board, the Student Justice Collective, your student board, Carmen, what I know today is that we are educating the leaders of today, not the leaders of tomorrow only. And we have to recognize that our youth have the skills, the voice, if we will simply give them the stage and help amplify that. They have answers. So, just want to remind everybody that our strategic plan is guiding our work, and our board and community has spent a lot of time, although it hasn't been as transparently visible in the last couple years. But we've been working on a refresh of our 5-year strategic plan. We know that for any work to take deep roots, you can't keep changing your goals every few years, so we're staying the course with our 5 goals. We are going to tweak our measurements to make sure that what we are measuring leads to a just system for every student in our district. And we've taken continuous input. We believe that by June of this year, we'll be coming out with our reframed strategic plan refresh, and we're so excited that our foundation comes alongside that strategic plan, and it guides us as a North Star for our district. I also want to say a ginormous thank you to each of our educators and all of our staff and our parents and families. How many of you are North Shore family parents? Yeah, wow. It's been a time, right? Like, it's been a couple years. But I will say that when it's all said and done, I think the data point I know our board are most proud of is that of the districts in our state, we lost the lowest percentage of students throughout the pandemic. And that's a fabulous data point. Our educators, I heard this morning, I was meeting with parents at Morelands Elementary and heard about some of the things our educators did during the pandemic. And I'm still hearing stories, right, about the teacher that came to the house to drop something off just in case the student didn't have it or didn't have time to pick it up. The stories that got read maybe after hours, just the how do I say, just incredible commitment, which makes, I think, North Shore different. Not because they're asked to do, because it's the right thing to do, right? And yeah. It's fabulous. And then finally, I just want to say a big thank you to our voters. The support of our recent capital bond and capital levy and our operations levy will enable us to continue to do the work we've been doing, and I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you. It's the largest scope of work in terms of touching 8 campuses for modernization, updating our one-to-one initiatives, and providing the mental health supports, nurses, title and lab support. Just all the things that will continue to support North Shore in our world-class education commitments. So I just want to remind you, as I conclude my remarks, to continue reimagining the possibilities and remind us that together all things are possible. And thank you this evening. Yeah.